Hey guys, let's see. I filmed an entire podcast before I went to Austin, Texas, and the audio did not work at all. Even though I did a mic check, the audio did not work, and I didn't realize until after 45 minutes of filming that it didn't work. So my man got me a new mic, but there's two of them, so I can now possibly have guests on, which I know I said I wasn't going to do a lot of, but I'd like to do a little bit of. So basically what we're going to talk about today is going no contact with a parent. And so, god damn. Okay, I just had to write some questions really quick because I was like, if I just start yapping with no direction, this entire thing is going to be with no direction. So going no contact, I feel like typically when people are talking about it, they are talking about a relationship. They're talking about an ex. They're talking about some ass man that they can't fucking get rid of, which I can relate. I feel like a lot of us can. But specifically today, I'm going to be talking about my experience going no contact with my mother. This is a harder one for me to talk about, just because I think certain wounds are farther away. They're no longer so applicable as like exes or stories from like high school or just like experiences of like past friends, just things that are not so applicable in my life right now. I've had a lot of time for those to heal, for me to be introspective, but this is something that's kind of fresh. And then also like even I think no matter how much time goes on, I think this is going to be something similar to grief, because I'm grieving someone who's alive, which is the flip side of the last episode that I put out, which was grieving someone who is no longer here with us. But this is grieving someone who is still here on this earth. And the different kind of feeling that is when it's your own parent or family member compared to when it's like an ex or a friend, or so, because it's all different dynamics, obviously. That's why we have different relationship dynamics. But yeah, so specifically I'm talking about my mom, but I feel like this is more applicable to any parent or just like a close family member. But I think there is something to be said about the special kind of pain of having to grieve your own parent who still lives and breathes and walks around this earth. So I'm sure this is somehow going to get back to her. No hate. No hate. I'm just trying to be vulnerable and honest about my experience in my life. I'm not going to get too into specifics of things that have happened to me in my childhood, but for all intents and purposes, this is alleged. Yeah. The first question I wrote down for myself, I guess, is what constitutes going no contact. So like if you're thinking about this, and again, it's like it's a hard decision to make regardless of who the person is, whether you're related to them or not, whether it's romantic, platonic, whatever. But I feel like it's, again, especially difficult when it is your literal parent, because we're taught, like growing up, these sayings that blood is always thicker than water, being taught to be passive when it comes to your family members, because, hey, you don't get to choose your family, so you just have to love them no matter what, which really doesn't account for toxic and or abusive behaviors that never change. And I don't think that like, I have never subscribed to that. I don't care if you're my family. I don't care like how close we are. If you're going to continue abusive and toxic behaviors, I'm not about to be your punching bag. And that's just my personal opinion. That's something that I've just kind of realized, is that it doesn't matter if you're blood, like that really doesn't mean anything when it comes to allowing people to disrespect you. Just because they're family doesn't mean that they get a pass to do that. And I feel like that's something that innately I've known from a very young age, and I've definitely been dissecting it even more as I go through therapy. But I feel like I've learned this lesson time and time again, and I feel like I'm just in the process of feeling very solidified in my decision. I think it's been a year now, which is actually crazy, I believe. No, probably half a year, I guess. It's been a while. It's been a while. So what constitutes going no contact? I feel like obviously that's up to the individual. You know, at the end of the day, when it comes to anyone, you don't necessarily have to just give a reason, but I feel like with family, it's a little bit different, and I'm going to explain. So, like, you could be, meeting people out in the wild in public, and just kind of like, you're thinking, I want to make some friends, and so you're like, maybe the acquaintances you already have at a job or a hobby or some sort of book club or your sports team, like, you already are surrounded by these people. And so, like, you're like, maybe I'll take this acquaintanceship up to a friendship, like, maybe I'll try and get to know people. And they might not do anything toxic towards you, but you might just not be feeling it, and you might just not be meshing. And you don't, like, I do believe in a level of communication, just period, and not being disrespectful, rude, juvenile. But at the end of the day, you don't really, like, have, if your boundary is just that, like, our personalities don't really mesh very well, and I don't want to continue to get close to this person, you don't necessarily really have to explain that. You don't really have to explain yourself. I feel like when it's a surface level thing, it's not that deep, you know what I mean? And also, some boundaries are just that. It's like, if you just don't want someone to do something to you, because boundaries control your own autonomy. It's not about, I don't want you to go live your life because that's my boundary. But it's like, if something is happening, being done to you verbally, physically, whatever, those are your boundaries, and those are things that, you can't control other people, but you can set the boundaries, and if they don't respect it, you don't have to be a part of that. Your boundary, and that's your right. It doesn't have to be any beef, doesn't have to be any bad blood. With family or people that we're closer to, I've heard, like, the analogy of, like, how many coins they put in it, not coins because that's, like, monetary, but, like, marbles, that's what it is, how many marbles they've put in a jar, right? It's like, if you've been friends with someone for 10 years, or you've been in a relationship with someone who is genuinely a good person for however many years, and you guys just progress in life together, they've put in so many marbles in your life that you've been through so much, and you guys have developed together. And that's the key, because obviously, just between being a good person and being an abusive person who does awful things to you and then does good things to you to try and basically to lack accountability. So instead of just saying sorry and actually fixing the issue and not doing it anymore, instead they're doing superficial things, buying you gifts, being grandiose, and, like, taking you through the toxic cycle of abuse. And then there's people who are genuinely good people, who genuinely care about you, who genuinely love you, who make simple human mistakes sometimes, and communication can actually solve that issue, which they have proven to you because their actions change after the apology. It's not manipulation, because they don't keep apologizing and doing the same thing. So those are the kind of people that, when I say they've put so many marbles in the jar, that they've shown me with good character traits, they're good human beings, like, we're able to communicate, we have a process that, when certain things happen, it's like, it doesn't matter how many maybe arguments we get into, because that's just a couple marbles out of the jar, out of, like, the thousands that they continuously put in every single day through their communication and their character, right? But when it comes to, like, an abusive or a toxic person, when you're building that foundation of relationship, it's like, no, you're the only one putting in marbles, and then they just want to keep taking your marbles, and then their apologies, they're just excuses. They're not real, genuine apologies. So they're just taking and taking and taking. They're leeches. And I feel like with family, it's even harder to kind of differentiate those two, because in our society, it's just kind of, like, been primed of, like, as, of course they're putting marbles in your jar because they're family. It doesn't really define, there's nothing greater to define a higher expectation of their behavior towards you just because they're family. So they can do below the bare minimum, but it's fine because they're family. And I don't subscribe to that belief. And so it's like, they could take you through the same toxic behaviors, maybe not exactly as, like, a romantic relationship, but it's like the promises and not following through, the verbal abuse, in some cases physical abuse, and I'm talking about generally, like, abuse comes in many different forms, and so they can be emotionally, verbally, mentally abusing you, all those things, and then the apology comes after with some sort of grandiose, like, I don't know, hey, let's go get ice cream, and just forget that happened without actually saying sorry. It's just kind of like continuing on, pretending nothing happened. I've seen that dynamic in a lot of families, including somewhat my own growing up, where it's just like, we're so used to the fighting and the arguing that we're just going to pretend it didn't happen, and I'm just going to bring you something or give you something, or we're going to go do something, and no real accountability is taken. And so again, what constitutes as going no contact, that's up to the individual 100%. But for me, if I was to give my 2 cents, the other person is constantly victimizing themselves. And it's like you're having to continuously come to their rescue. And I feel like when it comes to parents, you shouldn't have to be the one that's parenting them. I just feel like that's not fair. That was never fair to you, especially as a child. Like, you never got to experience the emotional safety of having that parent be there for you or help you regulate, which is like skills that you're innately supposed to be getting taught by your caregiver. And instead you're having to like constantly be in fight or flight because this person is letting you down in that way. But for me, going back to the analogy, I feel like it's someone who constantly is taking your marbles out of the jar. And every time you're pouring everything that you have into this jar, and they continue to take and take and take and leave you with absolutely nothing. They cannot take accountability, and their behavior does not change. And so like what that looked like for me from a very young age, I developed a very emotionally unhealthy relationship with my mom, in my opinion. Me, I remember it being because she was emotionally stunted in certain ways, which, you know, we all can be. Even now it's hard for me to talk about this because I have empathy and understanding, but it's like you can have empathy and understanding that yes, it is your parents' first time living, and, you know, there may be certain dynamics that they were, for instance, patriarchy, being oppressed under. It's like women didn't necessarily have it easy and still don't, especially growing up in a very conservative Christian household, especially older generations where they came from. And like I can understand the lack of help, especially when it came to like mental assistance, because that's even developed so much. But I think that it came for me from like an inappropriate emotional attachment that was formed from a young age. And by what I mean by inappropriate is that I was a parent. So oftentimes I was having to emotionally regulate my mom. Ultimately, I don't want to get too into it, but it's like that type of, I think a lot of people have experienced this, where maybe someone might apologize, but it's not very genuine, and you can tell because it's always, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm the worst person in the world, oh my God, I just do horrible things, right? And it's like they might be sincere in the moment that they feel like they might lose you, and so they're really trying to hold on because they're manipulative. But then when it comes to like their sincere apologies, it's never sincere, and it's always like, there was a reason why I did what I did, and you're over exaggerating, and like, oh, I must just be the worst person in the world. Deflection. And just deflecting. They can never see what you're saying, and they never choose to. So it's like, hey, and it always stems from the fact that they don't want to help themselves. And like they claim to want to, but then they don't do, you know, they continue the vices and the habits that might be perpetuating their behavior, whether that's drinking or drugs. And I'm talking in a general sense. It's like I may be continuing those vices, so clearly that's a hard thing to quit, but they're choosing their love for that over their own child. They are choosing their love for that ultimately over their love for their own selves, for their own health, physical and mental health. And like they continue in these self-sabotaging behaviors. And I think that some people who victimize themselves to their own behavior are like, woe is me, I can never get out of this. And I just like, you know, I need someone to come and save me from this. Like, I don't think that they realize that they have to be the ones that choose a better reality for them, and they're constantly looking for someone to fill the void. And I feel like that's a really dangerous state to be in as a parent, because now you're having kids and you're expecting your kids to save your life essentially and make you feel like you have a purpose and make you feel good about yourself. And if you don't if you have not worked on that intrinsic sense of self, then now you're trying to get it from every external resource that you can, and you're draining every person around you. And now you're doing it to your children who are too young to understand that this is not emotional regulation. This is not what emotional regulation is supposed to look like. This is not what emotional safety is. And so constantly different irate behaviors that might come forth, and it's never genuine apology. There's never change after. It's just, woe is me, life is so hard, and that's why I keep doing this, is because life is hard and because my life is horrible. And it's very self-centered, in an almost sneaky way, because I think a lot of people, you can have empathy for these people because they're really struggling, because, you know, we all struggle with sense of self. We all struggle with self-esteem. We all struggle with these things as a concept, but, you know, it's about like that tipping point where you might reach it in sometime in your life. You might reach it every day, where it's a choice every single day, but you're making the choice to be like, well, what can I do? I struggle with self-esteem, so it's not like, so what can I do to control my environment, because at the end of the day, you do actually have control. And I think that that's like a point that you either reach or you just don't. And if you're not able to reach that, you end up hurting a lot of people around you. And don't get me wrong, I believe in community love. I believe in the importance of a village. I don't think that you have to like go through all of life's trials alone and like never ask for help. I just mean that there's kind of, you know, as a parent, you don't have to be perfect to be a parent, but you do need to understand that certain things are not for your child to emotionally bear. And if you genuinely want help, there's ways to do that, whether that's with therapy, with gaining a good support system, with good friends. And, you know, for a lot of these parents, some people need to be divorced and they don't choose that. And they think that they're helping their family, but really they are not. Because now you're teaching your children that this relationship is the idea of love, which is very dysfunctional. They're not doing the work to heal this relationship, so it's just constant dysfunction. You're perpetuating that onto your children. And just, yes, that happened in childhood, but if I'm an adult and I'm still dealing with the repercussions of the decisions that you made, I can forgive you, but I can't allow you to continue doing the same behavior to me. Now that's going to affect my life and my relationships, and I choose better for myself, and I also choose better for the people around me. And it's a hard decision to make. And again, the person who victimizes themselves is probably going to continue to think, nobody likes me. Oh, I'm so awful. I birthed you. I did all of this work, but you can't even just say hello to me. But it's like at some point you start your own relationships, you start your own family. Do you really want to continue the generational cycle of harming your children by allowing them around this person who refuses to change? And so now that person that did that to you is now in an environment to be able to do that to your children. And now you're perpetuating the same cycle because you're allowing your child to be around someone emotionally unsafe because you have essentially become their emotional bitch, essentially. Like, you're just allowing them to continue to spew and project all of this onto you. And you're doing it in empathy and love in hopes that one day, maybe if you just stick around and love them, they will be able to love themselves and they will be able to make better choices, but they've continued to make the same awful choice over you. But they continue to make these awful choices over and over and over again. And it's never with the realization of what they're doing to you. It's always like, woe is me. It's a very self-centered mindset. It was a really long kind of yap session, so let's move on. Do I regret cutting my mom off? That's a hard question. I don't know. I could say no some days, and I could probably, actually I could say no every day. I don't regret it. However, the feeling I do have is that I might regret it in the future. I think that's the only scare, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's a different kind of grief. When someone is alive and you're mourning someone who's alive, you still have that feeling of like, well, at least their story isn't over. Maybe they can do more with their life, and who knows, there might be a resolution someday. Their heart might change. Not that I'm banking on that, and I definitely don't think you should, because I think that kind of defeats the purpose of no contact, in the sense that like I feel like you're inevitably going to break it prematurely, and so because you're just waiting. And so the whole point of no contact is to stop waiting on someone who has not once delivered on their promise. And so I don't really believe in like, oh, I know that things are going to change. They could, because I'm not going to sit here and say it's impossible. I've seen it. But at the same time, it's like, you might change and be a better person, but I might still not want you a part of my life because of the damage that's already been done. But I can still forgive you and wish you the absolute best wherever you are in life. And I feel like someone who's truly changed would respect that, because they would reflect on what they've done and the relationship that you guys had together, and would respect your space and your desire to kind of process that on your own timing, and give you the option that if you want to make, allow them to make amends later, you can open that door. But it's like, I don't think someone constantly trying to shove themselves through that door constantly, disrespect your boundaries, which was already the initial problem, and now they're furthering disrespecting your boundaries by not they can't respect that you don't want to speak to them. I don't think that showcases change at all. I think that showcases that they still have really negative attachment issues, that they are willing to break your boundaries in order to make their guilt soothed in order to make themselves feel better by hearing from you. I need to hear from you that you forgive me, but you've heard it so many times from me and you still keep doing the same thing. So clearly you are not sorry. You enjoy the dopamine and the soothingness, like the soothing calm that comes over you when you say you're sorry about something and I say I forgive you. It makes you feel safe to continue doing the same behavior. It makes you feel good. It's never about me. It's never about the other person. It's always about them. And so, do I regret it right now? No, but obviously we're human, right? And so you always get that feeling of like, well, if this is forever, I could literally never speak to my mother again. And then the grieving of someone alive turns into grieving someone who eventually, your parents are going to pass away. It's just the truth of life. And if you don't speak to them and then they end up passing away during no contact, now you're grieving the fact that you did not speak to them for however much time during your life. And now there's zero opportunity for that to change, which again is a very permanent decision. And then that turns into the kind of grief that I've experienced with my friend who I no longer have the option to ever talk to again. That is a little bit different because if you've watched my last episode, we weren't no contact. We just had stopped being friends for a while and we're kind of like just starting to talk again, but we were never fully just no contact. We just kind of grew apart. But this with my own parent is a choice. And so it's a choice that feels permanent right now, but it can become very permanent depending on the circumstances. And it will be something that I cannot take back if I choose to never speak to her again and she ends up losing her life, And I think that every child who goes no contact with a parent deals with this almost like borrowed regret where it's like, I don't really regret it right now because my life has changed for the better. And I'm finally able to have the space to like unpack a lot of things that I've gone through and things that were said to me and done to me, etc. Without feeling like I'm constantly being pulled back into that cycle, which like gives me zero ground to grow, heal, and move on from it. But I do have that thought of like, what about when I'm 50 or 60 and I have my own children and something may happen and it may happen earlier than that. And it's like, am I going to change my mind the older I get? And like, sometimes it feels that way because people will tell you, again, it's like conditioning, especially, it's just conditioning of like, well, that they're family. So they should be able to do anything to you, no matter how awful, and you should be able to talk to them and love them and allow that behavior, and they should have no repercussion for it, just because they're family. And I just really don't subscribe to that. Sometimes older people specifically who subscribe to that belief will basically tell you like, you're going to regret that later on. You're going to like, you should change your mind essentially. And sometimes it does give you that perspective of like, am I going to regret that as I get older? Because already I've experienced so much change in my mindset and how I view the world, and I'm only 24. So it's like, when I get older and I have my own children and I understand what it's like to be a mother, am I going to change my mind? I don't know. All I know is that it's what's best for me right now. And I can only take it day by day, and borrowing regret from the future is only going to cause me more issues in the present. So do I regret it? No. Do I struggle with the concept of I might regret it in the future? Yes. What's the hardest part? Honestly, I'm hitting a lot of big milestones in my life, and eventually I'm going to get married and have my own kids. And I think the hardest part for me is honestly, I think about having my wedding and her not being there, and it, that would suck. But I think it doesn't like hit as hard as the idea of when I get pregnant or when I have my own children and she's not going to be there to experience that. But I think more so, it's like knowing that if she was here to experience it, she still, in my opinion, would probably not handle it the best, and it would be way more stress on me, and I would be having to regulate her emotions and not mine, and those kinds of things. I'm not really grieving something that's real. I never really had that kind of relationship because she never offered that emotional stability. So I would say that the hardest part is just realizing that there's no chance of that developing. As you get older, you're experiencing things that, a wiser, older woman who has gone through this is supposed to be able to speak life into you and help you and, give you secret tea remedies when you're feeling nauseous and like just certain things that I feel, no one has a normal experience. Like, normal is the wrong word because what really is normal, but other people have good relationships with their mom, you know, and they get to experience these things. But the thing is that not speaking to my own mom right now is not the reason why I don't get those experiences. I never have, and I would not, even if I was still speaking to her. So I think the hardest part is just like, kind of like the acceptance of going no contact means that you've like accepted, like, it doesn't matter if that person was still in your life, you still wouldn't have this relationship, an actual strong, healthy relationship with this person, because they have made it so that cannot exist based off of their own behavior and their own actions. And so like all you can do is control yourself and control who is in your life and what you allow in your life. You can walk away, but you can't force people to change. And so I think that's like the hardest part for me. Does it impact my relationship with other family members? I would say that I have certain family members that encourage me, like I said, that are like, oh, maybe you should just talk to her. But I would say that like most of my family is understanding towards my decision. I feel like, obviously, like I have multiple siblings, and so it doesn't matter if you have siblings. It's like it can be the same household but completely different experience, which I feel is extremely applicable to me and my siblings. However, we all have our own different, you know, I'm not here to tell my siblings stories, so it's like, you know, they have their own opinions and views on things, but I wouldn't say that it necessarily has made me drift apart from my family by any means. I have a very strong relationship with my dad now, and that's because he was able to grow and change, and he has learned. No matter how old he gets, he continues to learn and adapt and grow and change, and that is why I'm able to have such a strong relationship with him. And in that, he has grown very emotionally stable, regulated, and supports my decisions. So obviously, like, none of us are happy about things like this. I would say a lot of my family comes with understanding, at least like my immediate family. Most of my extended family can honestly go fuck themselves. And that's a whole nother story. But yeah, so I wouldn't say that. I mean, like, when it comes to other relationships, like, I feel like I have friends, especially like my best friend, where we have a lot of very similar experiences. So it's very like a bonding point for us, I guess I would say. But it's nice to have people in your life that understand the experience that you go through. I will say that I don't really have like, I feel like I see other people who don't have strong relationships with their parents, or like none at all, find like mentors and stuff, but I feel like I have never in my life had like a strong woman to look up to, a wise woman. Like, I guess actually that's totally not true. My grandma definitely is someone that I heavily look up to and I love so much. But you know, I feel like for some people can kind of step into a motherly role where it's like, no, you're not my mom, but like, I feel like my grandma did that in some ways when I was growing up, but at the same time, she is my grandma. I don't feel, so when I'm talking about strong woman, I guess what I mean specifically is I don't feel like growing up I had like a mentor or someone who kind of like really stepped in to play mommy, if that makes sense. Not that anyone necessarily should, but I feel like I didn't really have that like very close proximity, like strong mom role model type of thing. And I wasn't even really close to my bigger sister until I was literally like out of high school. So I feel like I didn't have that close mentorship. And again, love my grandma, very strong relationship with my grandma, but she's my grandma. She's, I don't know. It's different. It's not like she raised me specifically. I wasn't living with her. I feel like that would be different if I was in fact living with her, but I do have a very, very close relationship with her. I guess there's like people who definitely have helped mentor me. I guess it's just, I hear, like, I watch this influencer and like she has someone that she literally calls her mom because it's her best friend's mom and they've been best friends since they were like in 6th grade or whatever, and they call her her daughter, and calls her mom, and like goes there for Mother's Day and like celebrates her as a mother and like calls her as a mother and like does all of these things. And I don't really necessarily have that, or I haven't had that consistently throughout my life. And I mean, there's like been women, like I would say I was really close to my junior high teacher. Shout out Mrs. Gordon. I don't know if you would want to be mentioned in a video like this or not, but yeah, my junior high teacher is amazing. She is amazing, but like being in her class specifically was amazing. And She was there for me, and I feel like I can speak for my classmates that can say like she was there for all of us. And we would have like prayer meeting in the mornings where I would go to school and I would like vent to all of my friends at school, including my teacher, and they would pray for me, including her. She would pray over me, and I feel like she taught me a lot of really good life lessons. And like if something was going on at home, because we were so tight-knit, we typically knew what was going on in each other's lives. So I feel like she would really go out of her way to comfort me, talk to me, like give me good advice. And then there was like my high school sweetheart's mom was like, threw me a 16th birthday party, would take me to get pedicures, would help me with my homework, would like made me feel like a normal teenager with like a normal mother, I guess. Again, normal is relative. I'm not normal. Not everyone's normal, but it's just like, I guess I should say an emotionally regulated, oops, forgot this bad boy was on here, an emotionally regulated experience, I guess I should be saying, instead of normal. But there's been people in my life that I feel like, especially when it comes to the teachers aspect, where I really like latched on to like English teacher, feels like my mother situation. But those were all like, temporary, not in a bad way, where it's just like you cycle through life, you grow up, you experience different people. So I never really had like a consistent, same strong like mother figure in my life. And so that's like been really hard to navigate, I feel, especially like as I get older and I experience just things in womanhood that like already was hard enough being a little girl and not really having like that navigation of female energy that was strong, and to be able to help me navigate through that. And I feel like it definitely led me to handle certain things in more masculine ways, whatever the that means, honestly. But just like, I feel like I mimic my dad's behavior in a lot of things that I handle emotionally and stuff. And especially growing up with 3 brothers too, I feel like sometimes that impacts my relationships in the sense of like, I'm experiencing all of this on my own with like very little guidance from a woman who understands, that came before me, who is passing down that wisdom. So sometimes I feel like a little bit disconnected and lost, and I feel like I go through a lot of trial and error where I have support, but I feel like I have support from my friends, from my peers, but I don't really like have that like mentorship that I feel like people would receive from having that same gendered parent that has literally gone through your exact experiences. Not to say that if you're a single parent, like you're not enough. I don't believe that that's true. I just mean it is a different experience. My mom had a period. My mom gave birth to children. There's certain things that you as a woman experience that men know about, but they don't essentially like understand it. So it's like not the same thing as receiving that guidance. And I feel like sometimes that definitely pops up just in my everyday life as a woman. But I feel like, we make do. And I think it's going to make me a really good mom and have a really good relationship with my children. And doing the work and being able to create an emotional safe space, and also going through all these experiences with trial and error, I'm going to get a lot of wisdom from that I'm going to be able to pass down. And yeah, so that's all the questions I kind of wrote for myself. I could go on and on and on. And I also, again, didn't want this to be just like a story time of the fucked up shit that I experienced as a child, because again, like that's really not my goal here. But my goal is more so to reach out to people who are going through a similar experience. It just like feels kind of sometimes like you're drifting alone in space, and I'm just putting it out to the ether to let people know that you are not alone, that this is, we're all humans. My goal is to connect always. And I would just say, if you're going through this, just remember that your peace is more important than anything, and have empathy for people, but don't let it destroy you. So you can still be loving and still be forgiving of people and not hold any hatred or animosity in your heart, while also living your life with people who genuinely choose to love you and who do show you that they care about you through accountability and through their actions. That is an option. You can go find those people, and they may not be blood related to you, but you can have a chosen family. That's my episode. I think the next one I'm going to do no contact but with exes, because I have lots of advice and situations and stories that I will tell about that. So if you enjoyed, go ahead and like and subscribe if you like to hear episodes like this. If you watched to the end, thank you so much. And if you're in my sphere, you would like to come and talk about a topic of introspection, then, you know, hit me up, because I think I'm ready to take a guest or two. But yeah, bye.